We all need to cooperate in this prison break. Okay? So if you're going to bust out of prison, you need to know the layout. You need to know the blueprint. You need the floor plan of the facility that you're locked in. And the same goes for the economic captivity that our countries are trying to escape from. So you look at supply chains, because chains is exactly what supply chains have been for us to a great degree. Nations no longer grow what they eat or build what they use. Every necessity, from seeds to semiconductors, arrives to our countries on ships through choke points that are controlled by corporations, priced in currencies that our countries don't issue under regulations that we don't write. If you're not a producer, you are a dependent. Means if you're not a producer, you're a prisoner. And the same is true even if you are a producer, but you need permission to produce, or you have no say in what you produce or for whom you produce. And the more efficient the so-called supply chain is, the more dangerous is the dependency, because it becomes more addictive. Just like a drug that gets you high faster, you become dependent more quickly. You become addicted. You become an addict to that delivery system. And you go into withdrawal if the system breaks down in any way, or if it is deliberately tampered with, or if it is shut down deliberately. Farmers can't grow because their fertilizers are blocked by sanctions. Factories stall because shipments are delayed because of some new regulation in the country, or tariffs, or what have you. Entire nations could potentially face blackouts because diesel prices surged in Wall Street. These are not logistical hiccups. These are systemic design features ensuring that even your survival depends on uninterrupted compliance. That's not a stable approach to survival. That's not a stable approach for survival, and certainly not for prosperity. And then, just like in prison, you have guards, you have security. The same with the system of economic incarceration. The architecture of captivity is held together by institutional gatekeepers, the IMF, for example, the World Bank. They don't lend money, they rent you permission to function. Understand? In exchange for dismantling your public sector, for privatizing your commons, and for exposing your economy to the wolves of global finance, basically making yourself vulnerable. The World Trade Organization doesn't facilitate trade, it enforces rules that benefit multinational exporters at the expense of domestic producers. You understand? They say if you implement tariffs or subsidies or other protections for your domestic industry, then they'll say that you're hampering free trade, because their definition of free trade means the freedom to extract your resources and your wealth without restriction and without having to share any of it with you, any of your own wealth and your own resources. In other words, free trade for them means what's theirs is theirs and what's yours is theirs. While calling what they do free trade is like saying that a rapist is practicing free love. I've explained before, Western foreign direct investment is not pumping money into your economy. It's sucking money out of your economy. It's a syringe, right? And you think that they're giving you medicine with that syringe, but actually they're taking blood with that syringe. They're extracting from you. They use your labor, they use your land, they use your resources, and then they shift all the profits offshore and leave your people jobless the moment that a cheaper region opens up. And even the job that you had was basically a job of digging up buried treasure in your own backyard and handing it over to them. That's the job that they created for you. Well, that's not a job, that's humiliation. You were hired to rob your own house. Development is not the purpose of any of these institutions. You must understand that. Their purpose is to discipline nations into obedience. They create the rules, you follow them. That's the so-called rules-based order. That's what the rules-based order means. They give the orders and you follow the rules. And the point of the orders is to debase you. Understand that for the West, the word development is just a euphemism for dependence when they're talking about you. So when they say that they want to support development in your country, or they say that they want to help you develop, you know what they really mean. It means reshaping your society to be in compliance with Western interests. It means training your young people not to build your own nation, but to service the interests of foreign capital. That's what it means. Okay, that's not development, that's domestication. That's what they mean by development. They don't want you to be self-sufficient. They want you to only be optimized for their use, not for your own survival. Okay, so this is the architecture of economic captivity. Global supply chains that entangle and disempower institutions that dictate and do not assist, and a model of development that punishes autonomy and rewards compliance. To escape this architecture, we need to become exactly what they have always tried to prevent us from becoming, which is self-reliant, self-sufficient, and completely independent and economically sovereign. And for that, we don't need to protest, we don't need to plead, and we don't need permission. We need to construct alternatives, brick by brick, well by well, seed by seed. We don't need to bring their building down. We just need to stop living in their building. And that begins with sufficiency. Not as isolation, but as strategy. Not as survivalism, but as sovereignty. When captivity is systemic, escape has to be structural. You understand? It's not enough to protest or to critique or to demand reform. The system is performing exactly as it was designed to perform. It cannot be reformed into a just system. It has to be refused through function, not fantasy. Through reality, not through rhetoric. Practically, not symbolically. It's about building intentional zones of economic integrity. Zones that can sustain themselves, defend themselves, and that refuse to comply with global systems of exploitation. Not through violence, but through non-reliance upon those systems. You can conceptualize what I'm talking about as the creation of what you can call local and cross-border sufficiency zones. A sufficiency zone would be characterized by autonomous production of essentials, food, clean water, shelter, primary health care, basic education, and energy, survival requirements of life. Within a zone like this, their provision is going to be guaranteed through local production and local systems of distribution. No community should go hungry because of supply chain disruptions in some foreign port. You have to have a controlled interface with global capital. A sufficiency zone is not going to be closed off, but it will be selectively permeable. It engages with the outside world strategically, not by necessity. It imports only what it cannot produce, and only when doing so strengthens autonomy rather than weakening autonomy. Trade doesn't have to be exploitation. Economic activity can be governed by ethical standards rooted in Islamic principles. Fairness in contracts, transparency, prohibition of riba, social responsibility, the obligation to prevent harm. In zones like this, markets are tools that serve the people rather than the people being tools to serve the market. A sufficiency zone within a country wouldn't challenge the legitimacy of the state. It fulfills the responsibilities of the state communally as a support mechanism for the state. You understand? Sufficiency as a strategy of support, as a means to fortify the state by strengthening the people, strengthening the population. Sufficiency zones wouldn't be outside the state. They wouldn't be in defiance of the state. They would not be intended to replace or to challenge national governments, not at all. But they would be built to try to relieve some of the pressure on the state, to restore autonomy from the ground up, which ultimately just serves the interests of the state. In fact, this is the way that communities have always functioned, especially in the Muslim world. The Ottoman Empire, for example, the Ottoman Empire, particularly in the 16th century through the 18th century, they were repeatedly subjected to European economic hostility through embargoes, through trade manipulation, asymmetrical treaties, and so forth were imposed on them. In response, rather than trying to chase re-entry into European markets or appeasing foreign powers, hostile powers, the Ottomans strategically strengthened their internal commercial architecture. You had guilds, asnaf, that functioned not merely as professional associations, but as moral economic enclaves. Prices were regulated within those. Quality was enforced within those, and labor was protected within those. Production and exchange occurred within ethical boundaries defined by Islamic principles. These guilds collaborated across urban clusters, creating a network of resilience. Local yet connected, disciplined yet dynamic. In times of embargo, or in times of economic warfare, the Ottomans shifted towards intra-Muslim trade routes, redirecting commerce towards Anatolia, to the Levant, to North Africa, to Central Asia. This wasn't isolation, it was just reorientation. The goal wasn't to cut off trade, but to cut off dependence. Economic dignity can be preserved under pressure. but only by deliberately limiting exposure to hostile systems and by embedding commerce within a moral framework. You can go back even further and look at the Waqf system, how that worked. For example, under the administration of Nizam al-Mulk, a brilliant 11th century vizier of the Seljuk Empire, you have one of the most elegant models of localized public provisioning in Islamic history through the institutionalization of Waqf, charitable endowments. Essential services were decentralized and were placed under the guardianship of communities themselves. Masajid, hospitals, schools, soup kitchens, fountains, water fountains, they were all funded through permanent endowments that were tied to real estate, tied to agricultural land or commercial revenues. Now, once these were dedicated, these resources became inviolable and locally managed, with the stipulation that they serve the public good indefinitely. Okay? This system achieved three critical outcomes: financial independence from the state for vital services, community ownership over essential infrastructure, moral accountability that was rooted in Islamic theology and jurisprudence and fiqh. The Waqf structure immunized local economies against both foreign control and centralized mismanagement. It created a decentralized welfare economy grounded in trust, grounded in continuity, and in religious obligation. In Islam, economic sufficiency is not just a logistical arrangement, it's a moral responsibility. Production and distribution should be secured by permanent moral commitments that are embedded in the locality itself by and for the people who are directly affected. It's a territorially grounded, locally administered, managed economic ecosystem designed to meet the essential needs of a population within a particular zone of sufficiency zone, without relying on coercive, foreign-controlled systems. Okay, we're not talking about operating in the absence of government. It operates under the auspices of government. We're not talking about a separatist enclave. It's not some sort of off-the-grid survivalist commune or what have you. We're not even talking about underground shadow economy. We're literally talking about reviving the way that our societies always operated before colonization. A sufficiency zone would be a functional complement to the state, a stabilizing force for the state, a decentralization of resilience, a buffer against global shocks. It would enable the government to better focus their national resources, manage their crises, and negotiate from a position of strength, not from desperation. Sufficiency zones could exist within, obviously, rural districts, city neighborhoods, or even cross-border cultural regions. What defines them wouldn't be political intent, but practical independence. A zone that can produce food locally, a zone that can manage water autonomously, a zone for generating energy from decentralized sources, microgrids, etc. Operating labor and trade systems based on Islamic community, based on Islamic accountability. We're talking about a decentralized framework for national security, for stability from the ground up. From the ground up, not from the top down. Now, I should be clear, the concept that I'm talking about is probably better described again as strategic sufficiency rather than self-sufficiency. It's not the idea of complete isolation. When I'm talking about a sufficiency zone, I don't mean it's cut off from everything else. It's not disconnected from the rest of the country or from the wider world, but it's a corridor within a country or spanning even more than one country. A sufficiency zone would almost act like a buffer zone against predatory capital for the state, producing enough of what matters most to ensure resilience and to ensure autonomy and to ensure unpunishability by Western economic and financial systems. A sufficiency zone would almost act like a buffer zone against the threat of predatory capital. You don't need to manufacture aircraft in a sufficiency zone, but you need to be able to grow your own food. You don't need to own your own social media platform, but you must be able to secure clean water, energy, and jobs for your people. Aircraft and major industrial undertakings are beyond what I'm talking about. I'm talking about communities building their own strategic sufficiency that covers their core survival thresholds, so that no foreign power, no financial institution, and no transnational corporation can weaponize your needs against your state or your people. Because this doesn't just protect individuals, it empowers national governments. If the government is able to know that the people in this sufficiency zone are going to be okay one way or the other, and in this zone they're going to be okay one way or the other, well, that takes a lot off their mind. They don't feel the pressure to make deals with multinational corporations or with foreign investors because they feel that that's the only way that they can serve the needs or fulfill the needs of their population. If they can see that the population is fulfilling their own needs, that their population is already self-sufficient, then that takes a lot of pressure off of them. That's why I say it's strategic sufficiency. You reduce the burden on the national budget. You minimize the country to exposure to global price shocks. You're obviously creating alternatives to IMF-driven austerity measures. The government's not going to have to be forced into those things. You are strengthening the government with a constituency of self-reliant, capable citizens. Like I said, this isn't isolationism per se. Decoupling in this model isn't cutting off from the world. It's insulating your people from volatility. It's not a refusal to engage. It's a refusal to be coerced. It's not an abandonment of trade. It is the discipline to trade selectively from a position of strength. You won't have to panic if global currencies fluctuate. You won't collapse if foreign capital withdraws, if foreign investors leave. You won't starve if maritime checkpoints are closed or if you're sanctioned. You'll be able to help your economy absorb the shocks that the state is not able to prevent, or that are imposed upon the state because of the state's own defiance of Western systems. This is a way that we protect our countries. It's cooperation without subjugation. It's trade without selling out. And more importantly, it's a sovereignty that is scalable from the family to the village to the nation, creating zones of self-contained, self-sufficient subsistence will be a reinforcement, low-cost, high-impact stabilizers that allow national governments to operate with more flexibility, with more leverage, and with more legitimacy. So we are talking about not only collective sovereignty between countries, but collective sovereignty within a country. This isn't just a vague call for local empowerment, or a sentimental return to village life. This is a strategic infrastructure model rooted in Islamic ethics, designed for real-world implementation and engineered to sever the lifelines of dependency that keep communities trapped in that global economic prison.